So sa first presidential proclamation of amnesty covering the MNLF, 74 availed.
Yes.
Sa second one, itong proclamation number 1090, wala.
It didn't push through.
Wala.
It was
kasi
not.
nga-
It was never implemented, Mr. President.
Kaya nga, and then these amnesty proclamations have very short lifespan. Ganun po ba yun?
Sir, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, the two gentlemen are recognized.
Again, Mr. President, if I may, before we resume the period of interpellations, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the commissioners of the National Amnesty Commission, led by Chairperson Attorney Lea Tanodra Armamento, Attorney Jamar Colayan, and Attorney Nasser Maruham Salik. We also have from the Commission, Attorney Gwendolyn Pimentel. They have been here since Wednesday last week during our sponsorship, and they have been with us all this week since Monday. And I would like to place on record and appreciate their dedication, their willingness to answer all queries and concerns about the amnesty program, and to personally witness, hopefully, the approval of all our committee reports. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yung MILF. Is the granting, if I may commence with the permission of our
Yes, of course.
sponsor. I know he has another commitment before one of the biggest leagues of LGUs, Mr. President. But
Which I was a former president, Mr. President.
We'll make, yes, congratulations, yes, because the San Juan was then a municipality.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, is the grant of the amnesty to former rebels or members of the MILF a part of our government's commitment found in a peace agreement?
Yes, Mr. President. The amnesty program under the MILF peace process is part of the commitment of the government under the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, with the common desire to end the armed conflict and sustain the peace and stability in Mindanao. Mr. President.
This is the same agreement which has resulted in the BARM law, Mr. President?
It is separate, Mr. President.
Separate out. So may we be clarified? How many agreements are we talking about? Comprehensive agreement. Hindi, turo mo.
Mr. President, the legal basis for the amnesty of the MILF members are found in the annex on normalization of the 2014 comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, Mr. President. And according to my resource persons, I think the minority leader has also witnessed the signing of this annex, Mr. President.
Was that the one held in Kuala Lumpur, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
I
President.
was there, Mr. President.
January 2014.
That's a normalization.
You don't need it.
May we know for the record, Mr. President, who signed on behalf of the parties to that particular agreement which requires or commits the amnesty program, Mr. President?
Well, on the part of the government of the Philippines, it was Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, who is the chairman of the panel of the government of the Philippines. And in behalf of the MILF, it was Mohagher Iqbal, the chairman of the MILF panel. And it was signed in the presence of Tengku Datu Abgafar Tengku Mohammed. He was the Malaysian facilitator, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. I've met the Tengku Datu Abgafar Tengku Mohammed. A very amiable person, Mr. President. And I think he came here for the signing of the comprehensive agreement. Yes, unfortunately, we miss him, and siguro we have just to express our thanks to the Malaysian facilitator for having been very effective, Mr. President. Was there a previous presidential proclamation on the same subject matter?
Wala.
Dito, MILF, meron, di ba?
There was a similar proclamation, Proclamation 1090, under the administration of President Duterte, Mr. President.
So,
Proclamation. Proclamation 1090 under the administration of President Duterte, and Proclamation number 390 during the presidency of the father of this representation, Mr. President.
what does that tell us, Mr. President, when we have multiple amnesty proclamations? Anong ibig sabihin nito na yung past two amnesty programs or proclamations were not successful, Mr. President?
Yeah, as I have mentioned during the last interpellation regarding the RBB, ABB, RB8, hindi po natuloy yung amnesty proclamation during the time of President Duterte. Also with the same reasons. Mr.
Same reason, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Pero how about the previous one, Mr. President?
During the time of my father,
Yes,
Mr. President. How many more? During the proclamation amnesty number 390, during the time of my father, 74 were granted amnesty, Mr. President.
So sa first presidential proclamation of amnesty covering the MNLF,
Yes.
74 availed.
Yes.
Sa second one, itong proclamation number 1090, wala.
It didn't push through.
Wala.
It was
kasi
not.
nga-
It was never implemented, Mr. President.
Kaya nga, and then these amnesty proclamations have very short lifespan. Ganun po ba yun?
During the administration of President Duterte, it took only 1 year, but this particular amnesty will take 2 years, Mr. President.
So kaya nga, we are learning from past experiences, Male. We are now finding that the 1 year application period
It's too short.
proved to be too short in the
Yes.
past. Ganun, sa ginawa natin 2 years. Okay.
Correct, Mr. President.
So what is now the rationale? Why did we limit it to 2? Bakit hindi 3 years? Critical ba yun? Is that a critical feature of
I think
an
that is
amnesty
the
program?
most ideal time frame, Mr. President.
So yes, okay. So may ano naman yan, ano, there's nothing we can do about it, no, kasi that's in the
Yes, that is
presidential
in the
proclamation, no? So we
presidential
either we
proclamation.
concur or not concur. So how many are we expecting to who will avail of this latest presidential proclamation or amnesty program, Mr. President?
Mr. President, a number of approximately 1,500 MILF members are projected to apply for amnesty, while an initial of 400 MILF members with pending cases have been submitted by the MILF to the Philippine Government Implementing Panel, which shall be applying for amnesty, Mr. President.
Okay, so konkreto.
However, Mr. President,
yes.
it is noted that in the release statement of the implementing chair of the MILF, Mr. Iqbal, on the recently issued proclamation number 405, series of 2023, that thousands of MILF is expected to apply for amnesty, comprised of, how do you pronounce this? Mujahideen?
Mujahideen.
Huh? Mujahideen. And the commissioned combatants and members and supporters of the MILF, Mr. President.
Okay, so konkretong programa po ito at talagang nakikita na natin even yung bilang ng mga magbe-benepisyo or mag-a-avail ng programa. So, meron po bang, tulad ng tanong ko doon sa unang grupo po na binigyan ng amnesty, meron po ba tayong Socioeconomic and Financial Assistance Programs for our amnesty or surrendered MILF members, Mr. President?
Meron din po, Mr. President. The availment of amnesty itself is the benefit that will be received by the MI members, MILF members. The annex on normalization already provides that a socioeconomic program will be undertaken to address the needs of the MILF decommissioned combatants, their families, and communities. And this will be, Mr. President, this will be subject to an in-depth profiling and needs assessment, Mr. President. And the the MILF member will have to avail of these socioeconomic benefits through the task force for decommissioned combatants and their communities, Mr. President. And the TFDCC, the task force for decommissioned combatants and their communities, has socioeconomic programs enclosed within 4 categories, namely social protection, capacity development, livelihood and employment, and community-based infrastructure, Mr. President. If I can show you this chart, if I can submit it to you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. If you have a spare copy, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, thank you for the inputs from our sponsor, and thank you for using the correct term, Mr. President. I think the correct term to use to refer to our MILF brothers and sisters would be decommissioned combatants.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, this is part of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Pagkakaintindi ko mga na to, mayroong main agreement and then so-called annexes. Then government has to comply with its commitments before an exit agreement is to be executed. So, is this, ito pinag-usapan natin na amnesty program, that critical that without this there will be no there can be no exit agreement?
Yes, Mr. President, you're totally correct, Mr. President.
Ang commitment po yata natin ay 2022, meron ng amnesty program. So, is the other side not, is the MILF side not complaining that we are already delayed, Mr. President? Or in delay?
The MILF is quite aware that we are delayed, Mr. President.
Sige, but ano naman, basta we have a very understanding partner, Mr. President. So, we are thankful for that. So kung ganoon, that means we have established na this is a program which is part of our commitments, government commitments to the MILF. There's a timeline. We're siguro a little bit delayed, so we have to do this with dispatch, Mr. President, as soon as possible. The beneficiaries or the potential applicants are already
In place.
more or less identified and ready to avail of the benefits, Mr. President. There are already socioeconomic programs for them. Anyway, separate, which is
Yes.
separate from this
Yes.
amnesty program,
Yes, Mr.
Mr. President. And ongoing na, I'm sure ongoing na. Oh, so, ibang usapan na yung ano doon, yung kung meron mang complaints din doon po. Sige po. So in that case, Mr. President, I think we have already established the need for this program, and
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I see no reason why we should not give our concurrence as required by the Constitution to have a valid amnesty program, Mr. President. So let me again thank our sponsor for his patience and for the time he has given us, and for sponsoring this very critical measure, Mr. President. And I hope, siguro request na lang po tayo ng periodic briefing from the OPAPRU on the
Yes,
status of the different
represent-
agreements, kasi meron ng one main agreement pero mga annexes, and the annexes are treated as if they are also main agreements. O di ba? Separate main agreements din. So maka-monitor po tayo, so we will find out.
The representatives from the OPAPRO are listening, Mr. President.
Kung pwede mag-request, if they can approach the siguro to brief the entire Senate, or kung mas madali, individually.
Yes,
Just
if the need
separate.
arises, Mr. President.
We will basically be asking the same questions this time to apply to the amnesty proclamation covering the MNLF, Mr. President. Is the grant of amnesty to the commissioned combatants of the MNLF also part of a commitment by the government pursuant to a peace agreement?
Yes, Mr. President. The amnesty program under the MNLF peace process is part of the commitment of the government pursuant to the 1996 final peace agreement, Mr. President. This commitment serves as a part of the full implementation of the 1976 Tripoli Agreement between the government of the Philippines and the MNLF, particularly item 12A, third paragraph, which provides for complete amnesty in the areas of autonomy and renunciation of all legal claims resulting from the rebellion that took place in the southern Philippines. Section 153, item 3F of the 1996 final agreement carried over the amnesty provision under the 1976 Tripoli Agreement, Mr. President.
So in effect, we are implementing the 1996 final peace agreement. Medyo, this is already an old document, Mr. President. Ano ba status nito? How come it's 2024 and we're still implementing this?
Well, again, as I've mentioned earlier, Mr. President, it is a part of the commitment of the government pursuant to that particular agreement in 1996, Mr. President.
Have we tried in the past to comply with the grant of amnesty to MNLF members, Mr. President?
Well, you were asking about the previous proclamation amnesty, Mr. President?
Yes, for
All right.
MNLF, if there are, Mr. President.
Yes, there are three. Tatlo? All right. Four, Mr. President. Proclamation 347, done in 1994. There were 136 that were granted amnesty. Proclamation 724, 1996. There were 51 who were granted amnesty. And Proclamation 21, also 1996. 307 were granted amnesty. And Proclamation 1091 during the Duterte administration, but it was never implemented, Mr. President.
So kung nakikita po natin, so we keep on opening the amnesty program, Mr. President. So learning from past practice, sa ano yung pagkukulang natin? Are we providing too short a period of time for the application, Mr. President? Masama po ba or not advisable na ipahaba yung application period, Mr. President?
1 year. Yes, Mr. President. Under Proclamation 347 and the subsequent proclamations 724 and Proclamation 19. Under Proclamation number 347, 6 months lang po. And then under Proclamation 724, 90 days. And under Proclamation 1998, during the time of my father,
Proclamation 21.
Proclamation 21, 6 months. So I think it was
Can
kind
we
of
be,
short.
can we
Mr.
be
President.
educated, Mr. President, by the resource persons? Bakit ba napakaikli ng mga application periods? Tapos napakita naman na kulang yung time and then another amnesty program, iniiklian nyo pa rin. Why? Can somebody educate us, Mr. President?
Well, according to our resource persons, that is the decision of the President. Hanggat hindi pa siguro nakukuha yung mga number of rebels or combatants na nag-avail ng amnesty, ni-extend ng ni-extend.
Okay. So, okay, at least ang new feature nitong ating inaaprubahan na presidential proclamation, 2 years na. Okay,
Yes,
so
2 years na. I think that is the most ideal number of years for them to avail of the amnesty, Mr. President.
Nasabi na po ba natin yung projected number of MNLF
Hindi pa, not yet, Mr.
members na ina-anticipate po natin who can possibly or who might avail of this program?
Just like the MILF, Mr. President, 2,000 MNLF members applying for amnesty is their projection, Mr. President. The final number of applicants shall be submitted by the MNLF groups through the peace mechanisms, Mr. President. So a little bit higher than MILF. Kasi MILF around 1,500 lang as I mentioned earlier. Ito 2,000. A little bit higher.
May we know, Mr. President, just for the record, who signed on behalf of the parties to the final 1996 final peace agreement?
On the part of the government of the Republic of the Philippines, it was Ambassador Manuel Yan who was the chairman of the peace panel of our government. And on the part of the MNLF, it was Professor Nur Miswari, who is the head of the MNLF panel. And with the participation of the OIC Ministerial Committee of the Six and the Secretary General of the OIC. It was His Excellency Mr. Ali Alatas, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, and the Secretary General of the IOC, His Excellency Dr. Hamid Al-Gabit, Mr. President.
And then are there also socioeconomic and financial assistance programs for the members of the MNLF, Mr. President?
Yes,
Pursuant to this peace agreement or any any additional agreement, Mr. President?
Definitely, they will also avail of the socioeconomic programs for MNLF individuals and communities. These are the initial socioeconomic programs for individuals, and additional programs will be implemented based on a needs assessment to ensure long-time sustainability. The following are the socioeconomic projects for the community where NMLF are presently located, Mr. President. Sensya na, medyo maliit kasi, hindi ko na mabasa. Yung salamin ko. Okay, Mr. President, there will be socioeconomic programs for MNLF amnesty grantees enrolled under MNLF transformation program. The transformation program is composed of socioeconomic, security, confidence building, and community healing and reconciliation components, which altogether aim for the holistic transformation of the MNLF former combatants in order to facilitate their reintegration into mainstream society. Likewise, the transformation program caters to the families and communities of the MNLF former combatants in order to sustain the holistic and meaningful transition of the beneficiaries from armed combatants to productive civilians. I also am in hold of the chart if
Yes, Mr. President, if you can share it. So, Mr. President, ito bang 1996 final peace agreement with the MNLF, just like the 2014 comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, should also result in an exit agreement?
under the proclamation. Under the final peace agreement, there is no provision for any exit agreement, Mr. President.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. President, kasi it got me worried kasi ano na yun, that's already 28 years ago, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, ito na lang po, which is a question applicable to all of the amnesty measures we are tackling. What if there is a person who feels that the person granted an amnesty is not deserving or not qualified to be given the amnesty? What are the remedies available to this individual, Mr. President? Is it possible to first of all question the coverage of a person under the amnesty program, the grant of amnesty? Pwede po bang i-question yan ng individuals? Kasi marami pong mga technicalities yung ating amnesty program. May mga crimes covered, crimes not covered, may application period, merong whether you are an active member pa, surrendered member. So, yun lang po yung tanong ko. Let us say someone feels that, someone granted an amnesty,
Mr.
is
President,
not qualified. So, can that be questioned, Mr. President?
there is an opportunity to file an opposition, Mr. President, during the local amnesty board hearing.
Okay. But that's before the grant.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. But can the grant itself be questioned, Mr. President? Kasi may technicalities.
Mr. President, the supposed procedure is that the decision of the Office of the President on the grant or denial of amnesty may be appealed to the Court of Appeals within 60 days upon receipt.
It's there. It's in the amnesty proclamation. Well, where is that remedy found, Mr. President?
The draft. Well, it's found in the draft rules of procedure, Mr. President. The draft rules of procedure
Draft rules of procedure of what body, Mr. President?
of the National Amnesty Commission, Mr. President.
Oh, so you better act on the rules and issue formally the rules, Mr. President. Kasi I just wanted it spread into the records kasi of course merong pag may crime, there's a potential aggrieved family. Diba? Family of the victim. So what if ang feeling niya hindi karapat-dapat? So dapat may mga remedies din po siya.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, under the rules of court, as I mentioned earlier, the decision of the Office of the President can be appealable to the Court of Appeals, Mr. President, within 60 days.
What rules of court is that, Mr. President? Karango lang na yung Office of the President ng CA, Mr. President.
Under Rule 65, by certiorari, Mr. President. I'm not a lawyer. But,
Okay, so Rule 65. Depende rin if you can, tapos maybe you can even go to the Supreme Court kung gano'n. Anyway, so there is no, you're just using Rule 65, grave abuse of discretion, yun lang. Okay, so I think the rules, if the NAC is still drafting the rules, please look at this angle where a concerned individual who believes that the person availing of the amnesty and being granted the amnesty is not deserving for various reasons. Maraming possible reasons na hindi ka dapat makakuha ng amnesty. Meron po dapat klarong remedy on where that person should go. Baka may factual kasi rito, baka RTC pa nga dapat mag-start yan eh. Kasi may factual eh. May what crime did he commit? Meron dito bumagsak dito sa excluded crimes or crimes which cannot be granted amnesty. Just take a look at that angle, Mr. President, and make
Mr.
sure
President,
na
we will look into that matter, Mr. President. And I will inform the members of the National Amnesty Commission who are present here today, including your sister, Mr. President.
I think my sister is not a member of the NAC. She's just very close to the chairperson, Mr. President. So here for moral support.
Huh?
But at any rate, para klaruhin po natin, it's like a treaty, no? We cannot touch the presidential proclamation, Mr. President, no? We cannot amend we cannot amend the wording of the presidential proclamation declaring the amnesty program. What is pending before us is do we concur or not with the para klaro po yun, hindi naman
Mr.
yung mga 2 years hindi natin magagalaw yun, yung mga crimes covered hindi natin magagalaw yun. So the question before us, do we concur or not with the presidential proclamation before us?
You're
Is
correct,
that
Mr.
correct?
President. Yes, you're totally correct, Mr.
So with
President.
that clarification, Mr. President, and at any rate, nalagay na rin sa records yun at that need for a clear remedy for people who will claim to be aggrieved persons because due to the crime committed by the person applying, Mr. President. Basta ma-address na po yan, I think the system will be more fair for everyone involved. So with that, Mr. President, I thank again our sponsor and thank you for his insights, for his very clear responses to our questions, Mr. President. And congratulations again for acting expeditiously on this very important and time-bound measures, Mr. President. Thank you once
Thank you, Mr. President, especially to the minority leader. Mr. President, I was just wondering if we can approve on second reading these three amnesty proclamation, since there are no amendments, Mr. President.
Pwede, absolutely. And maybe we can just leave behind for next week the one of the CPP&P.
Yes.
Hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panonood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat at hanggang sa muli. Paalam.